Someone broke into their property and caused more damage than anyone around them initially expected. And that was just the most recent thing in a year that had already taken down a building, forced two separate long-held secrets into the open, and brought wild mustangs onto a farm that was already running at its absolute limit. Her name is Brittany Wallace, and she has been standing in front of a camera through all of it, without ever quite telling the audience the full version of what has been happening behind the scenes. By the time this is over, you will understand exactly what she and her husband have been quietly building through 11 years of rural content, and why 2026 may be the year everything they have worked toward finally starts to arrive. The channel that would eventually accumulate 43.5 million views did not start with a content strategy. Wallace Farm and Sawmill went live on YouTube in July of 2015, and it looked exactly like what it was: a family with a working sawmill and a piece of rural land who decided to point a camera at what they were already doing. There was no niche research, no algorithm testing, no viral hook engineered for a first upload. Just logs, saw blades, and a family that already knew how to work before anyone was watching. That origin matters because it is the foundation for everything that came after it. The channel was not built on personality or manufactured drama. It was built on process. Viewers came because they genuinely wanted to watch a bandsaw push through a 38-inch pine log, or see what quarter-sawn hickory actually looks like when the blade finally clears the last cut. The audience that found Wallace Farm and Sawmill in those early years was not looking for entertainment in the traditional sense. They were looking for something real, and they got it every single upload. Brittany was part of the operation from the beginning, even if the channel's name suggested the farm and the mill were the true main characters. She didn't build a separate lifestyle corner of the content, no softened homestead feed dedicated to canning jars and garden harvests, while the heavier work happened elsewhere. She was embedded in the same operation her husband ran: the animals, the equipment, the land decisions, the chaos that comes with running a real rural business and trying to document all of it at the same time. Over the years, that choice, to stay embedded rather than retreat to a safer, more expected role, would matter more than anyone watching in 2015 could have predicted. Most channels in the rural YouTube space divide along lines the audience has come to expect. The man operates the heavy equipment and handles the technical work. The woman manages the domestic side of the homestead and provides warmth and context. The content stays in its lane. Wallace Farm and Sawmill never fully committed to that structure. The roles overlapped from the very start, and that made the channel harder to categorize and, eventually, more compelling to follow over the long term. And if you think that was surprising, stay with me, because this next part is why the whole story matters. What the Wallace channel built over its first several years was not a typical YouTube audience. It was closer to a community of people who had a genuine stake in the operation. The sawmill was not a prop placed in frame for visual interest. It was a functioning business that ran on custom lumber orders, real wood species, and paying customers who had specific needs and specific deadlines. When a log arrived with something unexpected hiding inside it, that was not a produced moment. When a blade dulled at the worst possible time, they kept filming it anyway. That commitment to documenting the actual work, the friction and the mistakes alongside the results, created a specific kind of loyalty that is difficult to build any other way. The people who watch Wallace Farm and Sawmill are not casual clickers. They come back because they have learned something useful: how white oak behaves differently under the blade than eastern red cedar, why a 100-year-old cypress tree produces that specific grain pattern when the light catches it correctly, what it actually takes to run a solar kiln from nothing, the build sequence, the insulation decisions, the waiting, the results. These viewers are not watching for passive entertainment. They are genuinely interested in the craft, and the channel has consistently delivered on that. By the time the channel crossed 512 uploaded videos, it had accumulated over 43.5 million total views. That number is larger than it appears for a channel operating in this specific niche. There are homesteading channels with 2 or 3 times the subscriber count that have not come close to that total view figure, and the reason is straightforward: watch time. Viewers do not just click on Wallace Farm and Sawmill videos, they stay, they finish them. And they come back for the next upload because the previous one delivered something they did not have before they watched it. Brittany's on-screen presence inside that content evolved in ways the comment section had started to notice before the channel made it explicit. She began appearing in more titled moments, not just as background context, but as a participant the audience had developed a real opinion about. When the channel posted "We put Brittany on an excavator" in March 2026, it was not a throwaway day-in-the-life vlog entry. It was the kind of title that earns clicks because the audience already has a relationship with the person named in it. They know her. They have watched her long enough to have a reaction before the video even starts. That audience relationship would become the structural support for everything 2026 decided to throw at the channel. Here's what the comments kept asking, and here's the answer they never got, until now. Jeudini Swarm. Sometime in the second half of 2024, something shifted. The Sawmill, which had been the consistent heartbeat of the channel for nearly a decade, went quiet in a way it hadn't before. Videos continued to publish, but the energy around the mill specifically was different, and the audience was paying close enough attention to notice. Then in December of 2024, the channel posted a video with a title that confirmed exactly what the most observant viewers had been piecing together. "We are back running the Sawmill. The mystery is over." That title communicated two things simultaneously. First, that there had been a mystery, a period of disruption significant enough to be named as such. Second, that the channel knew the audience had been tracking it. The Wallaces were not pretending the gap hadn't happened. They were acknowledging it directly, which is exactly the kind of transparency that builds long-term trust with an audience that already knew something had been off. What exactly caused the slowdown during that period has never been itemized in a single explanatory video. This is a channel that operates on show-don't-tell principles, and the content itself carried most of the narrative weight. But the December return was not a minor moment. The Sawmill is the economic engine of the entire Wallace operation, not a hobby that could pause without consequence. Custom lumber orders have timelines. Business relationships have expectations. A sawmill that goes offline has real downstream effects on the people counting on it. The channel's energy going into early 2025 reflected the restart. New logging equipment arrived. Operations ramped back up. By spring of 2025, they were running full production days again, with the kind of output that could fill orders and keep the content calendar moving. But something about the December return video lingered in the audience's memory longer than a typical upload. It was confirmation that the Wallaces had weathered something they hadn't fully explained to the people watching, and that they had come through it, still standing, still filming, still milling. Most people who know this story stop here, but the real story starts right now. 2026 arrived without a grace period. Within the first few months, Wallace Farm and Sawmill posted some of the most consequential content in its 11-year history. Not because it was the most technically impressive or the most polished, but because the events being documented were real, and the stakes attached to them were clearly visible to anyone who had been watching long enough to understand the context. March 2026 brought two back-to-back videos that told the audience the family had been carrying something significant they had not shared. "We can't keep this a secret anymore," arrived first, followed quickly by "Insane progress in 4 days. Our wild Mustang journey begins." The secret was horses, specifically wild Mustangs, which carry an entirely different category of demands compared to traditional farm livestock. Mustangs are not animals that arrive from a breeder already accustomed to human handling. They are federally managed horses adopted through a government program, and they require significant consistent work, months of patient handling, before they can function safely as working or companion animals on a property. Choosing to add wild Mustangs to an operation that was already running a sawmill business, managing farm animals, maintaining equipment, and producing regular video content was not a casual impulse decision. It was a commitment that would reshape the daily rhythm of everything on the property. Then April arrived. "Our sawmill building got destroyed." Reads like a dramatic content title until you understand what the sawmill building actually represents to this operation. This is not a decorative structure. It is the physical shelter around the machinery that makes the business function. The band mill, the circle mill, the infrastructure that allows them to process logs into lumber that real customers have paid for and are waiting on. When that building sustained enough damage to warrant its own documentation and a title using the word destroyed, it was a business crisis dressed as a content moment. The audience that understood the channel knew exactly how serious it was. One phone call, one conversation. That's all it took to change the direction of everything. Volediet media te voort. The response to the building destruction revealed more about how Brittany and her husband actually operate than almost any other moment in 11 years of content. There was no pause. No pivot to safer, easier content while the harder situation got sorted out. No disappearance from the upload schedule. They kept documenting, kept milling what they could, kept accepting orders, kept showing up for the channel and the business at the same time. April 2026 also brought a second major reveal, separate from the Mustang announcement. The channel introduced a new shop build that had been quietly underway, a dedicated workspace that required its own multi-week construction sequence, framing, electrical installation, equipment placement, integration into a property that was simultaneously managing active sawmill orders, new horses, farm animals, and a content schedule running multiple times per week. This changed everything. Power is on at the new shop. Posted mid-April, and for viewers who had been following the build, that electrical milestone was not a small win. It was the moment the new shop stopped being a project and started being a functioning part of the operation. Running in parallel through the entire spring of 2026 was the solar kiln build. A solar kiln is not something that gets thrown together over a weekend. It is a serious infrastructure investment, a wood drying chamber that uses captured solar heat to season freshly milled lumber without the operating cost of a commercial kiln. For a sawmill that sells finished wood product to customers who need dry, stable material, this changes the economics of the business in a meaningful and lasting way. Green lumber sells for less and attracts fewer buyers. Properly dried lumber commands better prices, qualifies for more applications, and moves faster. The solar kiln the Wallaces completed in May 2026 was not a content project. It was a business upgrade that will affect their margins and their customer options for years. Brittany was present and active through every piece of this. Farm chores, equipment maintenance, excavator operation, hay cutting, horse care, corn harvest, and a downpour. In June 2026, the channel documented a race against incoming rain to save their hay, the kind of event that does not appear dramatic in a video title, but represents exactly the daily stakes of running a real agricultural operation. Hay that gets rained on before it's baled is hay that cannot feed animals through winter. These are not content choices. They are farm survival choices that happen to get filmed. At this point in the story, most people walked away. What she did instead is the part nobody talks about. July 2026 brought the kind of event that no working property wants to document. On July 10th, the channel posted "The break-in left more damage than we expected," and the specific phrasing of that title is worth examining carefully. It is not "someone tried to break into our property." It is not "we had a security incident." The emphasis lands on the damage, and specifically on the fact that the damage exceeded what the initial assessment had suggested. Coming from a channel that has documented a destroyed building and a prolonged business disruption without inflating the language for dramatic effect, that framing carries real weight. When Wallace Farm and Sawmill says something was worse than expected, they are not reaching for dramatic effect. They are reporting a fact. Property crime on a working farm carries consequences that extend well beyond the violation of the event itself. Equipment that has been stolen or tampered with cannot be used to process the lumber orders already on the schedule. Infrastructure that has been damaged, fencing, entry points, outbuildings, creates immediate and ongoing problems for animal care and property security. A sawmill business that runs on consistent daily output cannot absorb unexpected downtime the way a larger operation might. Every day the mill sits idle is a day the order queue does not move forward. What the video captured, and what drew the audience who responded to it, was the same quality that has defined this channel from its earliest uploads. The family moved through the disruption without catastrophizing it. They documented the damage honestly, assessed what it meant for the operation, and kept moving forward in the same way they had moved through the sawmill hiatus, the building destruction, and every equipment failure and weather emergency before it. Document it. Keep moving. Show people what rural problem-solving actually looks like when there is no scripted resolution waiting at the end. She never talked about this publicly, until now. Pull back from the individual events, the mystery hiatus, the destroyed building, the back-to-back secrets, the break-in, the horses, the solar kiln, the new shop. And a pattern becomes visible that most commentary around this channel has never stopped to articulate directly. Brittany Wallace is doing something that remains genuinely uncommon on YouTube's rural and farming side. She is a female co-creator, embedded not in a softened domestic version of homestead content, the kitchen shots, the preserved jars on the shelf, the garden walks framed as lifestyle, but in the operational core of a real working business. She operates heavy equipment. She manages the hay schedule. She is part of the conversations about equipment, orders, and infrastructure that determine whether the operation moves forward or stalls. The camera does not follow her into a separate, gentler corner of the property while the real decisions happen off-screen. She is present for the real decisions. In a niche where female creators have largely been positioned in a supporting or parallel role, the Homestead Lifestyle Companion channel that runs adjacent to a husband's heavier technical content, Wallace Farm and Sawmill built a different model. Not as a brand positioning statement, simply by reflecting how the actual operation ran, together with overlapping responsibilities and shared presence in the parts of the work that matter most. The audience found that, eventually, The channel has gained approximately 5,400 subscribers in a single 30-day window during mid-2026. For a channel sitting just below 90,000 subscribers, that is a significant rate of growth. It suggests the kind of inflection point that happens when a long-running channel's accumulated library, more than 500 videos, more than 43 million views, 11 years of consistent documentation, reaches critical mass with an audience that has just discovered it and immediately has years of content to explore. The Mustangs, the new shop, the solar kiln, the farm truck purchased at auction that they couldn't get home the day they bought it, the tractor shed currently being built from lumber milled out of free logs. None of these are content inventions. They are the actual decisions of a family managing a farm and a sawmill business simultaneously, in real time, documenting both without editing either one into something tidier than it actually is. And that's when the decision was made, the one nobody around her saw coming. As of July 2026, Wallace Farm and Sawmill is uploading multiple times per week and actively managing more concurrent projects than at any previous point in its 11-year run. The solar kiln is operational and producing results. The new shop is functional and integrated into the daily work. The tractor shed is under active construction, built from lumber, the sawmill milled out of a load of free logs, which is itself a demonstration of what owning and operating a sawmill enables at the property level. They are not paying retail for framing lumber. They are milling it themselves, the same way they have always done things on this farm. The Mustang program is ongoing. Wild Mustangs do not become settled farm animals on a short timeline, and the videos documenting their progress reflect that honestly. There is real work happening with those horses week by week, and the audience that came for the sawmill content is now watching an animal rehabilitation arc they did not anticipate finding here, one that will continue developing over months and into years. The break-in recovery is the current moment. Damage assessment, repairs, security evaluation, keeping the business operational while dealing with an aftermath that was not part of any plan and could not have been prevented by working harder or being more prepared. That is simply what happened, and the channel is documenting the recovery the same way it has documented every other disruption, honestly, without pretending the timeline is faster than it actually is. What Brittany has helped build through all of this, the quiet early years, the sawmill mystery, the building destroyed in April, the secrets that had to eventually come out, the property crime, and the real damage it left behind, is something that does not fit the standard template for what a rural YouTube channel is supposed to be. It looks less like optimized content and more like a genuine public record of what it actually takes to run a small rural business through a decade of real-world conditions. The wins are documented, the losses are documented, the repairs are documented. The days when things go sideways in multiple directions at once are documented right alongside the days when a beautiful log opens up on the sawmill and reveals exactly the grain pattern you were hoping for. That is what 43.5 million views across 512 videos actually represents. Not a content formula, a body of work. What Brittany Wallace has done on this channel is document a real life at full volume. The custom lumber orders and the break-ins, the wild Mustangs and the destroyed buildings, the secrets worth keeping until the right moment, and the ones that eventually could not wait any longer. She has done it as a female creator in a corner of YouTube that was not built with her role in mind. And she has done it consistently for 11 years without softening the edges to make the content easier to package or the story easier to tell. The channel right now is in its most active chapter. The solar kiln is running. The new shop is producing. The Mustang program is developing week by week. The family is still processing custom lumber orders while rebuilding from a break-in that caused more damage than they had initially expected. The next 12 months on Wallace Farm and Sawmill may turn out to be the most consequential since the channel first went live in the summer of 2015. Here's the question that genuinely divides the people who follow this channel. Do you think Brittany and her husband are doing things the right way, building slowly, staying honest, documenting the real version of everything? Or do you think a channel with 43.5 million views and 11 years of consistent output should be further along than 90,000,000 beatens subscribers at this point? Drop your answer below.